In this lecture, we're going to talk about the DynamoDB partitions. This is going to help you understand how DynamoDB works under the hood. So, what exactly is a DynamoDB partition? Now, the partitions store the DynamoDB table data physically. All right. So the partitions are actually 10 gig SSD volumes which physically store your table data. Now you should not confuse this with your table's partition key or the hash key, because the partition key is a logical partition, whereas the DynamoDB partition is a physical partition. It's SSD volume that's sitting somewhere in the AWS data center. And one physical partition can store multiple partition keys. So a physical partition can have multiple logical partitions based on the partition key value. And of course, a table can have any number of partitions, and the number of table partitions your table will have will depend on its size and the capacity that you provision on that table. Now, how many partitions to use is something that's decided internally by DynamoDB. You don't have a direct control on that, but your choices of provision capacity do affect the number of partitions that get created internally by DynamoDB, and we're going to look at how that happens in this lecture. So here we have 3 partitions, and this table has provision capacity of 600 WCUs and 600 RCUs. So each table is going to receive a third of capacity. So the provision capacity is evenly distributed across the available table partitions. So since we have 3 partitions, each of them is going to receive about 200 WCUs and 200 RCUs. And another super important thing to remember is partitions, once allocated, do not get deallocated ever. So if DynamoDB creates 3 partitions for your table, then even if you change the provision capacity later, even if you dial down your provision capacity, the number of partitions are still going to remain at 3. They can increase, but they cannot decrease. All right. Now, how do you calculate the number of partitions? One physical partition can only support up to 1000 WCUs or 3000 RCUs. This is the maximum throughput any partition or any 10 gig hard disk of DynamoDB can support. And again, you know the size limit is 10 gig per partition. So you can look at this diagram. Per single SSD volume, maximum it can store is 10 GB of data, and maximum throughput that it can provide you will be about 3000 RCUs or 1000 WCUs. So if you need more throughput, you will get more partitions. And if you need more size, about 10 GB, you will get more partitions. So the number of partitions will be either the number of partitions based on the throughput or the number of partitions based on the table size, whichever is higher. So a simple formula for calculating the number of partitions would be something like this. So PT stands for partitions based on throughput. So you simply divide the RCUs by 3000 and WCUs by 1000. You total it up and you round it up to get the number of partitions based on throughput. Similarly, based on size, you simply divide your storage in chunks of 10 GBs and then you round that up, and maximum of the two will give you the number of partitions that DynamoDB might use internally for your table. Now, DynamoDB does not disclose the number of partitions, but you can estimate the number of partitions using this simple formula.